So here we have a frequency table. So we have height in x centimeters going along the top row and the frequency going along the bottom row. So this is a grouped frequency table because we have our heights grouped together. So we have 130 to 140 has a frequency of 5. 140 to 150 centimeters has a frequency of 7. 150 to 160 centimeters has a frequency of 8. 160 to 170 centimeters has a frequency of 6. And 170 to 180 centimeters has a frequency of 4. So the table shows the height of 30 students. So 5 plus 7 plus 8 plus 6 plus 4 is 30. We want to find the minimum, the max, the maximum, the range, the mean, and the standard deviation from the calculator. So we first need to make sure that the calculator is clear of all previous content. So we press the Shift button, which is up here, and then we press 9, which is here. And you can see CLR is written in yellow above the number 9. So we press Shift and then 9. Shift and then 9. Then this will come up on the screen. So what we want to do is clear all. So we need to now press 3 because we've already pressed Shift and 9. Now we need to press 3, which is down here, so that it will clear all. Then we're going to press equals and AC. So next we press equals, which is down here. And finally we press AC, which is up here. And then this should come up on the screen. So just a blank screen, so we know we've cleared everything off. So it's Shift and then 9, then 3, equals and AC. And we should get a blank screen. Okay, so once everything's cleared off, we're going to start working through the question. So we need to set up the calculator to allow us to input stats with frequency on. So we're going to press Shift, then Mode, then the arrow down, then 3, and then 1. So we're going to press Shift, then Mode, then the arrow down, then 3, and then 1. So when we press Shift and then Mode, this should come up on the screen. Then when we press the arrow down, this should come up on the screen. Then we press 3, and this should come up on the screen. And then we press 1 to put the frequency on. And then we get back to a blank screen. So to set up the calculator so that we have stats with the frequency on, we press Shift, Mode, the arrow down, 3, and 1. And we should come back to a blank screen. And this means we've turned the frequency on. So now we're on our blank screen and we've turned the frequency on. We can continue on with the question. So we need to put the calculator into stats mode. So we're going to press Mode and 2. So Mode and 2. So when we press Mode, this button here, this should come up on the screen. And we want number 2, which says STAT. So that's our stats function. So once we've pressed 2, this should come up on the screen. So we only have one variable. So we select 1 because we've got 1 beside one variable. We enter the number column. So basically input our x values. First pressing the equals button after each one. The frequency will automatically set itself to 1. Then we go to the top of the next column using our arrow buttons. We enter each frequency pressing equals after each one. And once they have all been entered, we press the AC button, which is this button here. So remember, we want to press 1 at the start so that one var comes up, variance. And very, very important with a grouped frequency table, our x values that we input have to be the midpoints of our. So if we have a look at our grouped frequency table again, so our first interval was 130 to 140, so the midpoint of that is 135. So how you get the midpoint is you add the two numbers together and divide by 2. So 130 plus 140 divided by 2 is 135. The midpoint of 140 and 150 is 145. The midpoint of 150 and 160 is 155. The midpoint of 160 and 170 is 165. And the midpoint of 170 and 180 is 175. So these are going to be our x values, but our frequency will remain the same. Okay, so once you've selected 1 for which represented one variable, so 1 VAR, this should show up on your screen. So the 1, 2, 3 along the side means the first value, the second value, the third value. The second column will be our x values, so 135, 145, 155, 165, 175. And the third column will be our frequency, so 5, 7, 8, 6, and 4. So remember, we need to input our x values, pressing equals after each one. Then we use our arrow buttons to get over to the frequency column. We input our frequencies, again pressing equals after each one. And when we're completely finished, we press the AC button, which is here. So I've inputted 135 first, then I press the equals button. Then I inputted 145 second, then I press the equals button. Now I'm pressing 155 and I'm going to press the equals button. Then I inputted 165, press the equals button, and 175 and press the equals button. Notice that my frequencies are all at 1 automatically. So now I've inputted all my x values on my midpoints. Now I need to input my frequencies, so I press the arrow buttons until I get over to the frequency column. So now that I've moved my arrow buttons so that I'm over the frequency column, I'm going to press 5, because that's my first frequency, and the equals button. Then I pressed 7 and the equals button. Then I press 8 and the equals button. Then 6 and the equals button. And then 4 and the equals button. And now I have all my x values and my frequencies inputted. Now I need to press the AC button, which is this orange button here. And after I've pressed the AC button, this should show up on the screen. So a blank screen, it says stats, it's in degree mode, and I just have 0 in the corner. Okay, so we now need to analyze the statistics we have input. So we press Shift and we press 1. So we press Shift and 1. And we see that STAT is written above the number 1. And this should show up on the screen after you've pressed Shift and 1. So we have lots of options now. Number 1 will give us type. So all the different types. Change the type of data. Number 2 will go back to the data values if you wanted to edit them, if you wanted to change some of your x values or your frequencies. Number 3 is the sum function. So that symbol there looks like a capital E, means the sum of. So if you just wanted to get the sum of your x values, just adding up your x values, you'd press this one. If you wanted to get the sum of your x values squared, you'd press this one. Number 4 represents the variance. So inside of the variance we have 1 equaling an n, so this tells us how many terms there are. Number 2 has an x with a bar on top of it, that represents the mean of the data. Number 3 has like a little circle with a little tick coming out the top and an x beside it, and this stands for population standard deviation. So this is the one that we'll be using for standard deviation. And number 4 has an S and an X beside it, and this stands for sample standard deviation. And then number 5 represents the minimum or the maximum of X. So number 1 will give you the minimum X values, number 2 the maximum X values. So once you've chosen your required output, you need to press equals. Okay, so to get the minimum, we need to select the min-max function. So we would have already pressed Shift and 1. So Shift and 1 to get into this option. So when you press Shift and 1, which represents STAT, stats, this is what shows up on the screen. So then you need to choose your option. So if you choose 5, you'll get to minimum and maximum. But on my calculator, I have an extra function, so maybe my calculator is a slightly newer model. So on my calculator, number 6 is minimum or maximum. So just obviously go with whatever it says in your calculator. So press whatever number it is beside the minimum and maximum. When you go into that, you should have an option of number 1 being the minimum x value, number 2 being the maximum x value. So obviously to get the minimum x value, you're going to press 1. And min x should show up like this. And then you just press equals, just down here. And 135 should show up. So 135 was our minimum x value. And that makes sense because our first interval was 130 to 140. And the midpoint of 130 and 140 is 135. So 135 was our minimum x value that we inputted. So next we're going to get the max. So to do that, we start by pressing AC to clear what was on the screen. Again, we press Shift and 1 to get into stat mode. And then again, we choose the min-max function. So on my calculator, it's number 6. On this calculator, it's number 5. But either way, you go with your own calculator. Once you press that, then you have to press the number 2, because that will give you the maximum function. And then press equals, and 175 should show up. So there we have our max x value, 175. Okay, so next we want to get the range of the data. So we can just say 175 minus 135 is 50, so there's the range. Next we want to find the mean of the data. So again, make sure you press AC to clear the data. Then we press Shift and 1 so that our stats options come up again. So this should show up on the screen, or on my calculator I'll have 6 options because I have number 3 is edit. So then we want to get the mean. So to get the mean, we want to go to variance. So on this calculator it's number 4, but on my calculator it's number 5. So again, go with your own calculator. So type in the number that's written beside VAR. And then this should show up on the screen, or something similar. So the mean is going to be the x bar function. So we're going to have to press 2. And this should show up on the screen. And then we're going to press equals. And 154 should show up. So there's our mean, 154. And then lastly, we're going to find the standard deviation. So again, press the AC function. Again, press Shift and then 1. And our options for stats should show up. So this time we want to press 5 again. And we should get into our options where we had the mean a minute ago. And on my calculator, the standard deviation function is number 3. So it has an X, then a little circle with a little tick sticking out the top and an N stuck onto it. So that's what's on my calculator for standard deviation. Yours might look slightly different. So this might be the symbol that comes up otherwise. But either way, our standard deviation works out to be 12.74. So the question asks us to find the minimum, we got 135. The maximum, we got 175. The range, we got 50. The mean, we got 154. And the standard deviation, we got 12.74.